From being set to miss the entire 2023-24 season to the franchise not putting a date on its return, here's why Lonzo Ball's career is potentially over. First of all, you won't be seeing Ball play for the Chicago Bulls in the 2023-24 season, but that's not because he's leaving the Windy City. He's set to miss the entire season due to that godforsaken injury. It's such a bummer, honestly, because there's nothing worse in professional sports than injuries, so much talent gone down the drain. All because of something that's in no one's control. Pre-injury Lonzo was easily one of the most talented guards in the league, and his ceiling was so high, which is why it's an even harder pill to swallow, because he had so much to achieve in the NBA. Unfortunately, a return to action doesn't seem likely. Definitely not in the short term, and very unlikely in the long term as well. The franchise confirmed the worst, revealing that Ball won't be in action for the 2023-24 season, and that means if Lonzo does return to action, it won't be until 2025 at the earliest. Of course, he could make a return to the start of 2024-25 season, but given the nature of his injury, the Bulls are expected to be patient with him. You won't see them rushing Lonzo to be fit in time for the 2024-25 campaign, and he'll probably be doing light work on court, if everything goes well, and then he could finally take the floor sometime during the 24-25 season. Either way, the biggest losers from all this are still the Bulls. You'd think that Lonzo Ball got dealt the worst card, but somehow he's still better off, because he'll be making some dough during his unfortunate time off with injury. Chicago, on the other hand, are in a world of pain. It's also very hard to feel any sympathy for the franchise, because even if I ignore their pathetic dealing of Ball's injury, the franchise has made some terrible decisions, which have cost the team in the short term and in the long term. Lonzo's absence was common knowledge on NBA Twitter, and that came from plenty of NBA insiders confirming that the injury was very serious. But the Bulls failed to make any moves to strengthen their roster. They gave up on the 2022 summer, completely not bringing in any major game changers, and the few decent players they had on their roster are also at risk of leaving the franchise sooner or later. It's a disaster, and the front office has to take the blame, because there's no way they didn't know what was happening with Lonzo. And yet they failed to improve the roster, or even go down the road as a potential rebuild. Fun fact, did you know that the Chicago Bulls were voted as the most depressing team to support in 2022? I don't blame their fans for saying that, because their team in the short term isn't good enough for playoffs. And there's nothing to look forward to in their future. The upcoming 23-24 season is only going to make things worse, because the Bulls are getting worse. And there'll be some big name departures from their roster too. Despite all this uncertainty, it's frustrating to be a Bull fan, because there's no clear direction that the franchise is taking. They could have gotten rid of their players to focus on a potential rebuild, but they're stuck right in the middle. Now, with confirmation of Lonzo remaining on the sidelines for the 2023-24 season, the Bulls have been dealt another blow. What's worse is that everyone in the organization knew that Ball isn't returning, at least not anytime soon, and hoping against hope is a fan activity, not something you use to run a franchise. Without Lonzo in the side, the Bulls will miss his presence in the backcourt. And even though they've got some talented players to run things, the original plan was to reap the rewards of Lonzo becoming a superstar around the 2023-24 campaign. That isn't happening anytime soon, and while the fans are disappointed with how things turned out, it's up to the franchise to put things right and inject a bit of positivity into the franchise. I wouldn't be holding my breath on that happening. It's not worth it, and the best way out is to hope that Zach LaVine explodes in 2023 and beyond, with positive news on the Lonzo Ball front. That's the only way Chicago can get out of this rut, because when Lonzo's balling, there are few better sights in the NBA. As far as two-way skill goes, Ball has it all. He's just as good on the defensive end as he is on the offensive end. And he was starting to add more points to his gameplay before his injury. Ball's had a tough start in the NBA, having left the Lakers and the Pelicans without a lot of promise, He's had his fair share of injury troubles even before this big injury, as he managed to play more than 60 games only once in his young career so far. He was on course to break his best of 63 games in the 2021-22 season, but that knee injury shattered the hopes of every Bulls fan. Before he got injured, Lonzo had been putting on a show for the fans. He was scoring over 42% from the three-point range in the 21-22 season, while grabbing nearly 6 rebounds and dishing out over 5 assists. These are very impressive numbers for a youngster, and the talent was there for everyone to see. LeVar Ball did a great job with Lonzo as well, but his knees have always been a point of concern. Despite injuries though, most analysts rated Lonzo more than his brother LaMelo. And with LaMelo playing like a superstar, it remains a pipe dream to see how high Lonzo would have been rated by now. The biggest concern with the Bulls guard is how there's no permanent solution for his injury. ACL injuries, broken legs, MCLs, the NBA can be a very dangerous sport to play. We've seen some terrible incidents over the years, which involved career-ending injuries to some seriously talented bunch. But this Lonzo Ball case is one of a kind. The problem with Lonzo's knees is that the doctors haven't been able to put a finger on what exactly is the issue. This is set to be his third surgery on the same knee in just over a year, and the latest surgery is called the cartilage transplant surgery. The doctors have told the player and the franchise that this is something they are trying. There's no guarantee that the surgery will sort out the issue. The Bulls' vice president was asked about the incident, and when the VP himself says that if Ball returns, it'd be great, then you know that this is a very serious matter. He also told the reporters that the next year or so will be seen as a preseason for the youngster, and they'll take it from there. Ball's first surgery was for a torn meniscus, but the pain and discomfort didn't go away, so he's had to undergo 2 more since then. Arturas Karnisovas, the Bulls VP, did leave the reporters with a bit of hope, saying that he knows that Lonzo will eventually return to the court, just that it won't be anytime soon. That's why the franchise isn't putting any date on his return, despite some reports suggesting that he will be back in action for the 2024-25 season. I think a lot of it has to do with how far the 2024 season is, and with a whole year in between, things can change dramatically. My fingers are crossed for Ball's speedy recovery. Of course, but there's so much that can happen in a year. All the Bulls confirmed was that Lonzo won't be playing in the upcoming season, yet I feel if the recovery is going well, Chicago might play him in a couple of games toward the end of the season to gauge where he stands. But there's also uncertainty over Lonzo's future as a Bulls player. You see, Chicago, as you can understand, think of Ball as an investment, and so far it's not been the best of investments. They have inquired with the NBA about a way to get rid of the contract Lonzo's on, because he was on an $80 million contract extension over 4 years, and he's got 2 more seasons of that left after the summer of 2023. With more than $20 million tied up in his contract per year, it's not a shock that Chicago are looking for ways to get out of that obligation. That'd be a disaster for Lonzo, especially if he misses the entire 2023-24 campaign, because he could end up without a franchise at all. Who even knows if any NBA team takes a punt on him after that? Time is running out for Ball, especially with rumors surrounding that he may never be able to make a full recovery. So from the franchise not putting a date on his return to the Bulls guard set to miss the entire 2023-24 season, this was why Lonzo Ball's career is potentially over.